Hello everybody, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about living a life of zero willpower, and this is a continuation in my series of continuing Neil Landa's blogs. So the first thing we need to establish this video is that willpower is in limited quantity. It's not an unlimited resource, and therefore the title of this video comes from having a life where you require the minimum amount of willpower such that you never risk going off course, because we all know that when willpower is exhausted, it's during those moments when you can either get caught on social media or do something which you'll regret later on. So that is to say, when we don't have willpower, we know it's a good idea to meditate or go for a walk because that will rejuvenate us to get into a better situation. But it's in that same situation where you risk to get into death scrolling. So one thing that I'll say first of all is that willpower is one of the finite resources that we have as humans. So there's also money, time, work. So this video applies to anything which is in limited quantity and you want to use in the most optimized manner. But for me, and I think for most viewers, discussing willpower in all of our examples is the most productive. So we need to put systems in place such that we can expend some willpower now, so that later on, when we want to implement some set of actions, the willpower is less than if we did not have such a system or plan at all. So when I mean system, it's a pretty ambiguous term. So it can be a routine or an automation. So like a routine, going to the gym. An automation would be implementing something in your Google Calendar such that you will do something with higher probability and require less willpower once again. So this means that we need to decrease the activation threshold for you to do the activity through these systems. So if you're thinking, well, I'm not really sure like what's taking up my willpower and how to get a hold of this issue, one thing I'd recommend is to simply go through your life over 24 hours and notice if there's anything for which there must be a better way. That is to say, are there any bottlenecks? Because I love to use my statistics, and 1 minute a day wasted is 6 hours a year. And we all know we waste many minutes a day. And I'm not saying that you need to save every minute of your day. Like at a certain point, chasing the last minute is extremely unproductive and has diminishing returns. But maybe there's something that you're doing which you don't even realize that is reducing 10 minutes of your day. And that would be 60 hours since it's 10 times more. So this is a good exercise to frame yourself in the mindset of noticing how you can improve and what requires the most of your willpower. And while doing this challenge, if you decide, use a system to capture the ideas and observations. You may already do this. All I'm saying is take notes. So this isn't anything complex. And not only will this help you to remember, but if you try to keep things in your head, just as a general rule, this takes up your working memory. And there's studies that show that it's finite. Some psychologists have defined the brain as having 7 units of working memory, but this is beyond the point. All it does is take up your attention though, which will affect the rest of your day. So make sure you're noting these down either in your to-do list app or in whatever form of capture system you use. And remember that any system which by design requires a lot of effort and willpower is not a good system. Furthermore, when designing a system, you need to minimize switch costs. And what I mean by switch costs is switching from one task to another. And there's many studies, such as those evoked in the book Deep Learning by Cal Newport, that demonstrate that the cost of switch costs is non-trivial when you go from doing one thing to another. So either try to batch things one after the other. So one example is if you have a lot of administrative tasks that are like, okay, send an email, do an appointment, just very repetitive tasks that you have to switch constantly between them. It's better to do them all at once rather than in a separate part of the day. So this is called batching. And in this case, this will make it so that your switch costs are not expensive because you're not doing anything that's taxing anyways. So this is an important concept for systems, first of all. So one system should either be all batched or be a singular task. And second, make your default failure positive. So what I mean by this is that make sure that if you lack the willpower, then what you'll do by default is still good, such as having no Coke or any soft drinks in your home. So if you're thirsty, then your willpower will tell you, well, I need to drink because that's a human requirement. But if there's only water in the house, then you'll have no choice but to drink water, which is good. And another good example is if you drive a lot and you can walk instead, so walking is possible, or taking the bike, then hide your keys somewhere or don't put them by the door so that when you go towards the door to leave the house, you'll have to come back, and this will increase the activation energy required to drive instead of walking. And another good example is that if you have your water that you want to drink to stay hydrated, maybe 20 seconds away, so you're in the office and the kitchen is 20 seconds away, then bring your pitcher into your room in the office so that if your water bottle gets empty, you can still drink instead of letting yourself get dehydrated. So let me give a resume now of the process of identifying a problem to putting a system in place. And this is kind of a summary of the video I've made about habits that stick. So first of all, we need to find a problem. So this comes back to what I talked about in the 24-hour deep observation challenge of really getting out of your day-to-day, simply going through the day without thinking and examining your life as if you're a second person auditing how you do things. And once you find your problem, now you can hypothesize how it can be solved. And a great way to do this is just to use your System 1 simulator, or just think about it in your head, which is in essence that. So let's just say, just think about it and you'll get intuitive ideas about what methods will work in terms of reducing the willpower. Next, you got to make a plan. And one thing that's important is that it's better to make a rough plan first and then a robust plan than trying to make a very detailed plan from the start. Because when you make a very detailed plan, you risk getting lost in the details and trying to make it perfect and then never putting the plan into application. And this is because you must never forget that a robust plan is better than a weak plan, which is better than no plan. So if you at least get the rough plan, you have a weak plan. Whereas if you try to go straight to a robust plan, then you might not finish it and then you'll have no plan. So it's much better to get a draft and then iterate on that, then try to get the best plan from the first start. So once you get your plan, now you can start to do pre-mortem evaluations. So what this means is that consider your plan failed before you ever do it. So that's why it's called pre-mortem, post-mortem being afterwards. And we need to do this such that we can avoid whatever would happen later on. And our mind is really good at grounding itself in a situation where there would be a failure and then thinking about what the processes would be that would allow this failure. And as I mentioned in my habits video, a great way to better internalize this is by using your simulator in your head to think about how you would feel once the project fails or once your plan fails. So maybe your plan is to do a weekly review every Sunday evening. So imagine yourself at Sunday at 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. and you have to go to sleep, but then you realize, crap, I didn't do my plan. And then, as I've said before, ask yourself, does this surprise you? If it doesn't surprise you that you didn't do the weekly review, this means that your plan is not good. And instead, now we can realize, okay, I'm not surprised that I didn't do the review on Sunday evening because I didn't set a timer. So now you know I need to set a timer and improve your plan in this manner. And with respect to the rough versus robust plans, it's always good to set a 5-minute timer once you have the problem in mind and just get a plan on the paper in 5 minutes so that you have something physical to refer to. And then now you can start to implement your system. And of course, don't just keep your rough plan. You need to revise and iterate over time so you can continually improve. So some systems which can rise from the algorithm that I just described would be noticing whenever something's inefficient in your life. So this is to say, having a continuous 24-hour audit of your life and not only noticing that it is inefficient, but fixing it, which is to say, noting it down and then having another system in place such that everything you note down will be addressed. Another one would be noticing when you have drains on your attention or willpower and asking yourself, is this necessary? So the trigger would be something is really draining and the action is this necessary? And most of the time you'll surprise yourself because they might not be necessary. And another one would be noticing every time you're pressing the try hard button or pressing the try harder button, which is to say willing yourself to do something. So this is almost identical to the one I just mentioned. And instead of asking yourself, is this necessary? Ask yourself, is there a hack or is there a impressive 90% efficiency that I can use to avoid what I'm doing by brute force? And lastly, noticing whenever you have a clever idea, but doing something about it. So just noticing it or doing something to make sure you don't forget, because I'm sure that throughout your days, you definitely come up with some cool ideas. Maybe you're on the train and you notice something that's really inefficient, but then you just notice it and you don't ever put it into action. This is another cool thing which you can remember and then maybe come up with the next innovation. This is like low-hanging fruit. Most people, they don't act on what they think. So you can separate yourself by this. And one thing that you may be worried about, which is valid, is the trade-off between willpower and spontaneity, which is to say, if you try to reduce willpower as much as possible, you might get lost in this optimization cycle and perhaps lose some creativity or spontaneity from not having a plan. But the trade-off here is not as bad as you think. And it comes to the concept of an internal versus an external optimizer. An internal optimizer is trying to optimize things in the moment. And this is not that productive because you're using your intuition. So perhaps in the moment you're thinking of, this is the good order which I should do the tasks in order to get everything done. But maybe this will actually lead to a lot of switching costs because you're doing so many things and switching between them. Whereas the external optimizer is thinking at a high level such that you can plan your week. So an example of an external optimization would be having a block time every week to plan your day for the next 7 days. And then just living in the moment, carpe diem for the entire week, knowing that you've at a high level set this plan, this system in place, so you don't have to worry about the internal optimization of going through every second internally. And then you can live spontaneously as well because you're not consciously thinking of optimizing every single thing at once. I realize that this kind of contradicts the challenge I said at the beginning of observing your entire life with a very critical mind for 24 hours straight. But this is not something that I would recommend you constantly do because that could use a lot of willpower over time. Okay, and then you have some examples of systems. How can you make yourself accountable to actually doing them and not overestimating with the optimization bias? So one tool is just great, it's called FocusMate, and you can co-work with strangers and it's all automatically scheduled. I'll send the link in the description. And also making a Google form with everything you plan to achieve in a given session and checking after the session whether or not this was an accurate plan. And once again, this is exactly to avoid the optimism bias, where you think you can do more than you can. Because if you practice continuously predicting what you'll do in a 50-minute work block, then you get better and better. And this will lead to more satisfaction because you won't constantly disappoint yourself by not getting the bar which you achieved. And another tool which I don't personally use, but I heard is helpful, is Cold Turkey and other apps which lock your laptop so that you can do a work session and then your laptop will be unlocked for 10 minutes so you can take a break and then literally synchronize it even with FocusMate, for example, so that you do a work session with a stranger. And then after that session, you can go on your break for 10 minutes and it doesn't require any willpower because your phone locks itself. You can go on Instagram if you wanted to. And then once your break time is up, then you can do whatever you want so that it's all automized. Automation is one of the main methods, if you can't tell already, to reduce willpower. And finally, let's talk about some meta systems. So these are some systems which will themselves reduce willpower. So one, of course, is weekly reviews, which I've already mentioned. Some examples, if you're looking for things to include in your review, would be noting the friends that you've been grateful for through the week and then sending them a message to tell them that you're grateful for them. Talking about your biggest success of the week. This one is important. Noting any distractions that you've had during the week and what you can do to remove them, because your attention is the most valuable resource you have, or one of them, your attention, your time, of course. And then another one in a similar vein is, what was the biggest bottleneck in this week? And if you want to take the bottleneck one even further, you can dedicate an entire afternoon to nailing down your bottleneck and then putting a robust plan into how you will remove it. And you can make a plan using the same pre-mortem framework. So maybe your bottleneck is once you get home, you're so tired and you just sleep or you just eat too much. So putting a plan in place such that a priori it should work, and then thinking of everything that could go wrong by using the pre-mortem system, which you ask yourself every time, am I surprised that this failed or am I not surprised? If you're not surprised, then that's bad. If you are surprised, then that's good because you've shocked yourself that it went wrong. So that means that it will likely go the way you intended. And another one would be an afternoon per week where you only consider your high-level life goal. So maybe this can be like solving a pretty difficult problem which affects many people, or what are your values? What is your mission statement? Things like this. I don't personally do this, but these are just some ideas that I wanted to throw at you in case you have the theory down, but you don't really know what to apply it to. So that was the video regarding Neil Nanda's blog post on having a zero willpower system. I'll have the link to every resource I mentioned in the description, and thanks for watching.